Okay, pre-calc assignment number 9.3. Write out the first 5 terms of this particular geometric sequence. So the first term would be what we get when we replace n with 1. So 2 times 3 to the first, which is 6. Then when we plug in 2, we get 2 times 9, which is 18, 54. In fact, I'll break out the calculator here because we are going to be allowed to do that this year. 162, and then multiply by 3 again, looks like 486. Notice that our common ratio is 3, that corresponds to this, and our first term was 2, corresponds to that. So if we come over to the second problem, writing out the first 5 terms here, let's first do the common ratio and first term, since that's fairly simple now that we've looked at it. Whoops, the first term was 6, not 2, because 2 times 3, because we replace n with 1. Okay, so when we do our common ratio here, we can see our common ratio is going to be -1/2. That's the object that's the base of the exponential part of the problem. And then the first term is what you get when you plug in n equals 1. 20 times -1/2 is -10. So that's what I would do first, because then I can write out my first 5 terms by simply taking a half each time. So half of this, make it the opposite sign, half of this, half of that, and then half of that, -5/8. Let's test it really quickly. If we were to replace n with 5, we'd get a 32 in the bottom, and yeah, that reduces correctly to there. Next 2 problems, recursive and explicit forms of this sequence. So the recursive form would be to say the first term equals 3, and then to get the next term, we take the previous term and we multiply by what number? So we're multiplying by the number -2, and so that's the answer to the recursive form, or -2 times a sub n. For the explicit form that we've learned is that we can write this as a sub n equals the first term, which is 3, multiplied by the common ratio, -2, to the power of n minus 1. By the way, this is the subtle reason why I almost made an error up here with the n, because that's not an n minus 1, that's an n, and our explicit form generally has an n minus 1. So sneaky, sneaky, sneaky. Okay, recursive form here, our first term is 54, and our recursive form would be to say, to get the next term, what are we multiplying by? It looks like we're taking a third, so we'll take a third of the previous term. And explicitly, we would say that the nth term is found by taking the first term, multiplying by the common ratio, and raising that to the power of n minus 1. So that's page 1.